Hello, welcome to our video on the adrenal signaling pathway, also known as the adrenergic signaling pathway. I'm Amanda.
And I'm Emmi.
In this video, we're going to be showing the signaling pathway for adrenal and how it produces a metabolic response. This pathway is represented in various areas in the body, including lungs, blood vessels, and kidneys, but we're going to be focusing on the reaction process and metabolic response that occur when the signaling pathway takes place in the heart.
To start out, what is adrenaline? Adrenaline is the signaling molecule for the adrenergic signaling pathways, aka adrenaline signaling pathways. Since this pathway uses G protein coupled receptors, we know the receptor proteins must be located on the outside of the cells, in this case, the outside of muscle cells. We also know that adrenaline must be a small hydrophilic molecule. G protein coupled receptors, GPCRs, are typically used by cells to detect and respond to external signals. These signals include light, odors, hormones like adrenaline, and various neurotransmitters. In general, GPCRs are quite useful protein receptors since they can trigger a wide range of downstream signaling pathways, which allows for complex and varied cell responses, and because they can sense a broad spectrum of extracellular signals. They do, however, still come with their own disadvantages. For example, it's difficult for GPCRs to achieve high selectivity for specific subtypes, which can lead to potential off-target effects. They're also expressed at very low levels, which makes them difficult to detect and study with traditional methods. This group of receptors generally works by having an external ligand bind to a GPCR, which causes the receptor to change shape. The change in shape activates an associated G protein. This activation involves G protein's alpha subunit swapping for its GDP for GTP, then the alpha subunit and the beta-gamma dimer separating to trigger downstream intercellular signaling pathways, leading to a cellular response.
Now that you have a basic understanding of G protein coupled receptors and adrenal, let's talk more about adrenergic signaling pathway. The specific signal of this pathway is adrenal. We're drawing it as this squiggly green line. You might recognize adrenal from phrases like adrenal junkie or adrenal rush. The receptor for adrenergic signaling pathway are G protein coupled receptors, which we discussed earlier. They look like this. There are 5 main molecules involved. They are the G protein, which is activated when the GPCR changes shape, adenine cascase, which is activated by G protein, cyclic AMP, a second messenger protein kinase a protein that switches on other proteins in the cell, and glycose phosphorylase, an enzyme that provides the fast energy needed for flight or fight.
Okay, let's jump into our situation. Imagine that you're walking home from school and your friend suddenly jumps out and scares you. Your friend scaring you and the fear that goes along with it makes your central nervous system think that you're in danger. This belief causes adrenaline, the fight or flight hormone, to be released from your adrenal glands into the bloodstream. This adrenaline travels to the heart and binds to its complement GPCRs located on the cardiac muscles, cardiomyocytes, and pacemaker cells. The binding of adrenaline to the receptors then leads to intracellular signaling cascade. The first step in this cascade is conformational change. The binding of the adrenaline triggers a change to the three-dimensional shape of the receptor, which primes the receptor to interact with the G protein. The interaction between the protein and the receptor activates the associated G protein. This then triggers the dissociation of the G protein, where it changes GDP for GTP, and the alpha subunit dissociates from the receptor. The activated G protein's alpha subunit then stimulates the activation of an enzyme known as adenyl cyclase, which works to increase the concentration of cyclic AMP, a second messenger, through the conversion of ATP as the concentration of cyclic AMP continues to increase. The cyclic AMP binds to the regulatory subunits of pKa, which you mentioned earlier, to release catalytic subunits. This activates pKa, which then adds phosphate groups to other target enzymes and the proteins through phosphorylation and activates glycogen phosphorylase, which provides the energy needed for heart muscles, which then triggers physiological changes in the heart like increased heart rate and increase in muscle contractility and quicker relaxation of the heart muscle.
This process also needs to be terminated because too much adrenaline can lead to a heart attack or other problems. So how does this happen? The first thing that happens is hormone dissociation. The adrenal signaling molecules were originally bound to the receptor through weak non-covalent bonds. This type of bond allows the adrenal to dissociate from their receptors. The next step in the termination process is G protein inactivation. The alpha subunit of the G protein functions as a molecular timer that has an inherent ability to hydrolyze its bound GTP back into GDP. This hydrolysis terminates the signal by converting the alpha subunits from its active GTP bound state to its GDP bound state. Once it has become inactive, the alpha GTP subunits reassociates with the beta-gamma dimer, reforming the inactive G protein and shutting down the signal. This is demonstrated by the diagram as well. Without the signal, the cynic AMP is quickly degraded, which then halts all the rest of the signaling.
Okay, great. So the final part of this video is more information about adrenaline, the agonist for this pathway. So adrenaline, this molecule being drawn here, is also known as epinephrine. It's a natural or endogenous agonist that stimulates adrenergic receptors, also known as adrenaline receptors, in the body, triggering the adrenergic signaling pathway and eventually causing physiological responses like increased heart rate and blood pressure. Adrenaline is vital in the signaling pathway because it activates the adrenergic receptors on target cells and triggers a signal transduction cascade that ultimately leads to desired physiological responses. And that's all. Thank you!